Good morning. Boys back in the zone back there. I forgot to pull up a website. Would it be okay if I pull up a website? Can I just? Okay. I got to yapping during the intermission there, and I forgot. Actually, if you guys could pull it up, it's on the bookmarks bar. You might have to scroll off to the right. The bookmarks bar isn't up here. We'll see if they can find it. 15 Facts, that one down at the bottom. That's the one. Thank you. And I'm going to show that first. So after the theme. Nothing like coming in unprepared. I meant to do that this morning and then totally forgot. So I'm going to pull up the presentation here. Or actually, you pull it up. It's a little easier. The regular presentation. Oh, I closed it. Oh, boy. Okay. See, this is why we have people back there. They do my dirty work for them. Yep, that's right. I shouldn't even touch this computer. There we go. So we're talking about the cycle of loving your neighbors, getting into the lives of your neighbors, loving on them, moving them to loving God, teaching people who God is, having them fall in love with God, and then moving them to serving others, and rinse and repeat and keep doing that cycle. Our theme verse this year is Deuteronomy 6:7. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Our theme is God first. And this quarter, we're talking about God and work. So specifically, what's our work ethic as Christians? Not just in the workplace, but what's our work ethic as Christians? Brent talked about that a little bit this morning in the class. And how does work relate to helping others? If you think about this cycle of loving neighbors, loving God, serving others, we don't just work for a paycheck. We don't just work to pay the light bills. Of course, we do those things, but the reason we work is to help other people. It's to bless other people and to help meet each other's needs. Today we're talking about not letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing in our giving. It's kind of giving in secret and not boasting about what we do. And now is going to be a good time to pull up that website. I did minimize that, or at least I thought I minimized it. Maybe I closed it. I hit escape. So escape apparently closes it. I thought it would just pull it out of full-size mode. So we've been talking about tzedakah. We talked about it last week. Tzedakah is the word for righteousness or justice. And specifically, it's about doing righteousness and justice. And what that means in the Hebrew scriptures is that it means you help people. You put your righteousness into practice by helping people who are less fortunate than you. It's about giving. And so these are 15 facts about tzedakah. But before I get to this list, Warren Buffett once said, he likes riddles, and he once said that you don't buy a dog in order to bark for it. You don't buy a dog in order to bark for it. And what he meant by that was you don't hire workers so that you do the work for them. And I think we can relate that to our giving as well. We don't help people so that we can do all the work for them. And that's part of tzedakah, and we talked about that last week. Doing righteousness doesn't just mean that you give to poor people and to people who are less fortunate than you. There's something also that's required of them. Tzedakah requires poor people to work. It requires them to do what they're able to do, and they don't just sit with their hand out and take hand-me-outs from people who are more fortunate than them, they also have to participate. They have to work. That's why in the Hebrew Scriptures in the Old Testament, you'll find things like farmers are told to glean the whole field except for what's on the outside. And they're not supposed to glean that as well and then take that grain and give it to the poor people. They're supposed to what? They're supposed to leave the edges of the field so that the poor people can come and they can pluck what's left around the edges. So tzedakah requires poor people to do their part. It requires them to help. It requires them to kick in and to do what they're able to do. And so these are 15 facts about giving, about putting your righteousness or your justice into action. Number one, tzedakah means righteousness. We talked about that a good bit last week. Number two, the pushki, or the charity box, is the hallmark of the Jewish home. In the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, there was a designated chamber, and this was called the Chamber of the Discreet Ones, where people could deposit money earmarked for the poor. This is the box when Jesus saw the poor woman putting the mites in. This was this box in the temple. She came and she was discreetly giving, and he was really impressed by her giving because he said in her poverty, she still gave. This actually was not that uncommon. I think what was probably uncommon was if she gave everything. But poor people also were supposed to give something. Tzedakah can be goods or services. Low on cash, cook a meal for an elderly neighbor. Visit someone who's ill. Volunteer at your kid's school. It's not just about giving money. It's about giving your talents as well. It's about giving your time. Number four, give in concentric circles. To give to the needy, you're supposed to give locally first. So you give in your family, you give in your local organizations, you give in your local congregations, and then you give beyond those people. So you begin with your inner circles. Number five, tzedakah for Israel is special. Supporting the poor of the Holy Land has a long and proud history. They used to send messengers to collect funds for the brethren in the diaspora. That's where people were spread out beyond Jerusalem in the exiles. And that's why you see Paul taking up these collections. That wasn't uncommon. Remember in both Romans and 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, Paul's taken up these collections for people in Jerusalem. That was not uncommon. Number six, charity saves from death. Charity is so potent that it can save a person from death. The Talmud illustrates this with the story of a reed cutter who was destined to die by a snake bite, but survived in the merit of bread. I can't even pronounce this now. Somebody pronounce it for me. Surreptitiously. That's a terrible word. The English language is so terrible. But he shared with a coworker. So he survived a snake bite. Does that remind you of any stories in the Bible? Remember when Paul was bit by a snake? He was doing good for people. He was on this island. He got bit by a snake and he lived. Charity saves from death. Helping other people. There's a long history of this throughout the Scriptures. You're supposed to give it before prayer. You give to people before you pray. That's very customary to give before praying. Number eight, give tzedakah before lighting candles. These are the candles before Sabbath. And so it was very customary, and still is today, for Jewish people to give before Sabbath begins. Number nine, people like to give in multiples of 18. Jewish people love gematria. You'll find this all throughout the Bible as well. Gematria is when you assign a number to a letter, and then certain words have a designated number. And so the word for life, which is chai, is assigned the numerical value of 18. So for example, if you give $180, you're giving 10 times chai, 10 times life. So multiples of 18 are really important. Number 10, you can make deals with God. While it's preferable to give charity just because, the sages, the wise ones, they say that one who donates in the merit that their child live is still considered perfectly righteous. And so they can strike deals with God. If I give this, please do this. Sometimes we do that in our prayers, right? God, if you do this, I promise to do this. We often, or at least myself, I often feel guilty in like striking deals with God, but it's actually not really a bad thing to strike deals with God. As long as you're not manipulating God and trying to bend his arm. Number 11, Maimonides identify 8 levels of charity. Maimon was I think, a rabbi, from what I understand. He lists 8 levels of giving charity. The loftiest is the one who extends a loan. This is interesting. The person who gives a loan to somebody, allowing the recipient to honorably support themselves with their dignity intact. That's at the top. The lowest is somebody who gives unwillingly, and somewhere in the middle is somebody who just kind of gives and doesn't expect anything in return. It's actually better to loan money because Tzedakah says, doing righteousness says, you need to work. The idea is not to create kind of the culture that we're creating here in this country, where you have these homeless encampments and absolutely zero is required of the homeless. That's not a biblical concept at all. To just give to people because, that's not a biblical concept. The biblical concept is you give in order to give dignity to that person so that they can begin working to the best of their ability and so that they can provide for themselves. It's everybody working together, rich and poor. Number 12, 10 or 20% is best. We talked about that last week, so I'm not going to hash that out. It's good to give 20%. It's good to give 10%. It's best to give 20% of your income, and then it's capped at that 20%. So you're not supposed to give beyond that. Otherwise, you'll put your family in a position where you're no longer able to be charitable. And you can actually become poor if you give too much. Do you know people who do that? There's kind of an interesting story about Barton Stone. I like Restoration history. Barton Stone was friends with Alexander Campbell, who's one of the people who is noted for, moving or beginning the Restoration movement, out of which our congregations are born. And so Barton Stone loved to baptize people. He baptized, it was said, anywhere from 30,000 plus people he personally baptized. He was an evangelist. He was very, very intelligent. He would go out, he would teach the Bible to people everywhere. He would baptize them. Very, very smart man. But he wasn't that wise. He loved to give money away. And to the point where his family was very poor. They were food poor. His wife often was at odds with him because they didn't have food in the home. They didn't have enough food to feed their children. And so she would kick him out. And one day he was wandering the streets and somebody said, why are you not at your house? And he said, the missus is not feeling well. The reality was he had been kicked out of his home. Alexander Campbell somehow caught wind of this, and he was very wealthy, and he handed a gold coin, and as quickly as he handed the gold coin to him, somebody was passing the road on the opposite direction, and the coin went into the hand of that person, and Alexander Campbell just kind of shook his head. He's like, that money was for your family to get food. So there is such a thing as giving too much, being too generous to the point where you make your family poor. That's not a biblical idea. Number 13, food is better than cash. It's better to feed somebody. Reflecting the traditional division of duties, the Talmud brings the assertion of the wife of Mar Ukva that a woman's charity is greater than that of her husband. We see this, I think, in the example of the Good Samaritan, right? It's not necessarily food, but it's taking care of somebody's immediate needs. That's better than just handing cash to somebody. It's putting them up in the hotel. It's saying, I will pay any debt that this person has, and when I come back, if they've accrued more debt, I'll pay that as well. That's this principle. It's better to give food and better to take care of immediate needs than to just hand out cash. Number 14, tzedakah, doing righteousness, brings the redemption. Keep justice and practice righteousness. For my salvation is near to come, and my benevolence to be revealed, says the prophet Isaiah. And then number 15, it's easy. You don't have to be very smart, like off the chart smart and intelligent and crafty and all these things. You don't have to do that to practice righteousness. And again, I'll quote Charles, do what's right always. That's tzedakah, doing righteousness. All right, Dave, before I mess it up, if you would pull the presentation back up, please. Just for the record, I am computer savvy, and I've never had Escape close a presentation when it's in full-size mode. Escape always minimizes it, and then you can minimize it further. But on this computer, Escape closes it for some reason. Here's our scripture verse in full. Matthew chapter 6, verses 2 through 4. This is Jesus giving the Sermon on the Mount. He says, thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Here's your motive. You don't practice righteousness so that you can receive praise. You practice righteousness so that you can, as a community, help people who are in need. Truly I say to you that they have received their reward, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Right now there are so many needs just in this past week. It seems like every Sunday I'm like slurring my words because I'm so tired. I'm exhausted, guys. Like I need this next week. I'm unplugging. We have our Hinton week in Shanksville. I might even turn my phone off for the week. I need to unplug because the needs are just, they're crazy. I was showing Dave this morning, I was getting messages from Julian in Haiti last night, in addition to just so many others this whole week. They had a windstorm like 2 days ago that took this massive tree, knocked it down onto the church building, did all kinds of structural damage. They don't have any money. Fortunately, nobody was inside the building, so nobody was injured. Their well that's on the property of the church quit working again. We've repaired it twice in the last year, about the last probably 14 months, I'd say. I'm guessing. It's probably been about 14 months. We've paid money to repair that well twice. That well services about 300 people. And so right now, and it's not a matter of, oh, well, you know, we'll pray and hope that things work out. We carry that burden. Like I literally couldn't sleep last night because I was worried about 300 people right now who don't have access to water. There are endless needs. And so we can't individually just take care of needs, and when we see needs, we're like, oh, well, I'll give more, because we'd be bankrupt. And so the idea of practicing righteousness is that you kind of recruit all kinds of people and you work together as a community, but you also get the poor people to do their part. And so it's not just giving handouts and being like, oh my goodness, here they come again. It's about asking people to do their part as well. And I've been very impressed with Julian, because I will say, my goodness, does that man work hard. And he has never disappointed, and he's just constantly serving other people. And anything that we ever give, he makes good use of it. and he helps out. But there are all kinds of needs like that. There are people who are ill. I saw Christina earlier. She's somewhere. There you are, the cane. And so with you, right, there are a lot of needs, and that's okay. Because with those needs, it blesses us with the opportunity to work as a community and to help people. And again, it doesn't always have to be money. It can be prayers. It can be your time. It can be showing up. I popped in yesterday and delivered bills to you. It's like, surprise, I checked your mail. But just popping in and seeing people, picking up a phone and calling people, spending time with people, that's all practicing righteousness. And when we do that as a community, it really, really helps people. And it helps people get back on their feet, and it gives people dignity. And that's practicing righteousness. We don't buy a dog to do the barking for it. We help each other out, and we allow people to still be themselves, to practice their own gifts, regardless of where their income level is. We allow people to practice their gifts, and we all work as a community. And we do the next right thing. Let's go out this week and help people to the best of our ability. And this morning we offer an invitation if there's anybody who has any prayer needs or has not yet taken the step to put Christ on a baptism and would like to do so. We would invite you to come up as we all stand and sing this song together. Eric?
To thee, O Lord,